everyone. This is Wesley, my broke ex. I invited him here so you can all see how lucky I am.
To have gotten rid of him, Tiffany snatched the microphone. 300 heads turned toward him. Brad grinned.
Honey, isn't that the guy you were dating in the gas station parking lot?
He invited me to dinner at the food court for my birthday.
Tiffany tilted her head.
He even had a coupon.
The room erupted. Brad raised his glass.
Thanks, man. Every time my wife sees you, she loves me even more.
Wesley stood behind him, his hands still clenched. Cheers to you both. Silence. Calmness. Then a guest grabbed Brad's arm. His face was pale. Search his name on Google. Brad smirked, typed his name in. The smirk vanished. The phone nearly slipped from his hand. He looked up at Wesley and couldn't breathe. Wesley Montgomery woke up at 5:15, the same way he had every morning for the past 6 years. No alarm, no snooze button, just his body pulling him out of sleep like it had somewhere important to be. He laced up his running shoes in the dark, stepped outside. The street was empty. Just him and the sound of his own breathing against the cool morning air. He ran the same 4-mile loop through the same quiet neighborhood he'd lived in since before any of it happened. Before the company. Before the magazine covers. Before his name became the kind of thing people whispered about at investor dinners. His apartment was small, clean. 1 bedroom, a couch that had seen better days, a kitchen counter with exactly 1 coffee mug on it. No art on the walls, no awards on the shelves. If you walked in without knowing who lived there, you'd guess a school teacher. Maybe a mechanic who kept his space tidy. You wouldn't guess the man who owned it had just been named to Forbes' annual list of the most influential founders under 40. You wouldn't guess his company, Pinnacle Capital, had closed a Series D round at an $840 million valuation 3 weeks ago. You wouldn't guess the Honda Accord parked outside belonged to someone whose net worth had 9 digits. Wesley didn't care about any of that, not the way people expected him to. He cared about the work. He cared about the math. The architecture of money, the patterns no one else could see, the algorithms he'd built from nothing in a garage that still smelled like motor oil and instant coffee. That garage was gone now. The company had real offices, real employees, real revenue. But Wesley still thought like the kid in the garage, still dressed like him too. That was the thing about Wesley Montgomery. He never changed. The world around him did. 3 years ago, Tiffany Brooks had been part of that world. They'd dated for 2 years, met at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was loud and bright and liked being looked at. He was quiet and steady and liked being left alone. For a while, it worked. The kind of relationship that makes sense on paper but creaks under pressure. She made him laugh. He made her feel safe. But safe wasn't enough for Tiffany. She wanted dinners that cost more than his rent. She wanted vacations with Instagram backdrops. She wanted a man who looked like success. The watch, the car, the cufflinks, the corner office. Wesley had none of that. What he had was a laptop, a folding chair, and a whiteboard covered in equations she couldn't read. "You're going nowhere," she told him on their last night together. She stood in the doorway of his garage, arms crossed, mascara smudged from crying. "I've waited long enough. I need someone who can actually provide." Wesley didn't argue. He nodded, said he understood, watched her taillights disappear down the street in the car he'd helped her finance. 3 months after she left, Pinnacle Capital closed its first funding round. 6 months after that, the financial press started paying attention. A year after that, his face was on a magazine cover. He never called her. never texted, never posted a single thing about it online. He just kept working. Then, the invitation arrived. It came in a cream-colored envelope, thick stock, gold lettering pressed into the paper. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Brooks cordially invite you to celebrate the wedding of their daughter, Tiffany Marie Brooks, to Mr. Bradley James Whitfield. Inside, tucked between the RSVP card and the reception details, was a handwritten note in Tiffany's looping cursive. Would love for you to come. It would mean so much to see an old friend there. XO. Wesley read it twice, set it on the counter next to his coffee mug, stared at it for a long time. He knew what it was. Not an invitation, a summoning. She wanted him there, the way a hunter mounts a trophy on the wall, proof of what she'd conquered, what she'd left behind, what she'd upgraded from. A living reminder for every guest in the room. Look how far I've come. He should have thrown it away. Instead, he ironed a plain white shirt, put on clean khakis, laced up the same shoes he ran in every morning, drove his Honda Accord 45 minutes to a country club he could have bought twice over, and walked in alone. The country club sat at the end of a long gravel drive lined with oak trees and white lanterns. BMWs, Mercedes, a few Porsches, all parked in neat rows like trophies on display. Valets in black vests moved between them with rehearsed precision. Wesley pulled his Honda Accord into the lot. The engine ticked as it cooled. A valet glanced at the car, then at Wesley, then back at the car. He didn't open the door, didn't even step forward, just stood there with his hands behind his back, like whatever this was, it wasn't part of his job description. Wesley opened it himself, stepped out, smoothed his white shirt, walked past the valet without a word. The entrance hall smelled like white roses and money. Marble floors, gilded mirrors, a guest book on a podium with a feather pen. Everything about this place was designed to remind you of what you could or couldn't afford. Wesley's shoes, the same ones he ran in every morning, squeaked faintly on the polished stone. A couple walking in ahead of him glanced over their shoulders. The woman's eyes dropped to his shoes, then climbed back up to his face. She didn't smile. The ballroom was already full. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, throwing soft, fractured light across 300 guests in tailored suits and designer dresses. White roses climbed every pillar. A string quartet played something soft and expensive in the corner. Champagne flutes caught the light like tiny golden torches. The kind of room where everyone belonged, or at least believed they did. Wesley was the only black man in the room. He noticed it the way you notice a temperature change, not with shock, but with quiet awareness. The way conversations paused half a beat when he walked past. The way eyes tracked him and then looked away a fraction too fast. The way a woman near the ice sculpture pulled her clutch closer to her body without realizing she'd done it. The way a man in a gray blazer leaned toward his wife and murmured something that made her glance at Wesley, then quickly look down at her plate. Nobody greeted him. Nobody shook his hand. Nobody asked his name. He was visible the way a scratch on a new car is visible, noticed, assessed, and quietly resented for being there. He found a table near the back, the one closest to the exit, sat down, poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher, and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Oh my God, he actually came! Tiffany's voice cut through the string quartet like a blade through silk. She stood at the center of the room, white gown trailing behind her, veil pinned with pearls, a champagne flute in one hand and a wireless microphone in the other. Her bridesmaids flanked her like a royal guard. She was looking directly at him. "Everyone, I want you to meet someone very special to me." She pressed her hand to her chest in mock sincerity. "This is Wesley, my ex-boyfriend. I invited him tonight because I thought it would be fun for all of you to see, in person, what a downgrade looks like." The laughter came fast, not the polite kind, the kind that feeds on someone else's humiliation, the kind where people look at each other first to make sure it's okay to laugh, then let it rip once they see everyone else doing it. Wesley set his water down, folded his hands on the table, said nothing. Tiffany walked toward him, slowly, every step a performance. The guests parted like she was walking the aisle for the second time that night. "Wesley, stand up. Let them see you." He didn't stand. "Come on." She tapped the mic with her fingernail. "Don't be shy. You never used to be shy when you were begging me to stay." Gasps. Nervous laughter. Someone in the back said, "Oh, damn," loud enough for the whole room to hear. A bridesmaid covered her mouth with one hand, but the grin behind it was wide. Wesley looked up at her. His expression hadn't changed since he walked in. Calm, patient, like a man watching weather he knew would pass. "You look beautiful, Tiffany. Congratulations." She blinked. That wasn't the reaction she wanted. She wanted flinching, stammering. She wanted the room to see the man she left crumble in front of the man she chose. So she pushed harder. "You know what's funny?" She turned to the crowd, mic raised. "When we were together, this man right here, once took me on a date to a gas station parking lot. He bought 2 hot dogs off the roller grill and called it a romantic evening. 2 hot dogs. And he was proud of it." The room exploded. People doubled over. A man at the front table laughed so hard his champagne spilled across the white tablecloth. Someone banged a fist on the table. A woman near the bar pulled out her phone and started recording. "And for my birthday, oh, you all need to hear this. He took me to a food court. A food court at the mall. And he pulled out a coupon, a printed coupon from the internet." She paused, letting it land. "He handed it to the cashier in front of me. Didn't even blink." Laughter crashed on top of laughter. Phones were up at every angle now, blue screens glowing like a constellation of cruelty. Someone was already typing a caption. A guest at the next table turned to Wesley and shook his head slowly, grinning. "Bro, a coupon? Come on!" Brad appeared beside Tiffany, arm around her waist. Tall, square-jawed, the kind of handsome that looked assembled from a catalog. Dark suit, gold cufflinks, a watch that caught the chandelier light with every gesture. He kissed Tiffany's temple and looked at Wesley the way you examine a stain on an expensive couch. Slowly, with faint, undisguised disgust. "Babe, is this the guy?" He let out a short laugh. "This is what you were working with before me?" "Sad, right?" Tiffany leaned into him. Brad took the mic, cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a keynote. "Hey, Wesley, real talk, brother. What do you actually do for a living these days? And please, don't say entrepreneur. We all know that's just code for unemployed." A roar from the crowd. Wesley met his eyes. "I work in finance." Brad's eyebrows shot up in theatrical surprise. "Finance?" He turned to the guests. "What kind of finance? Like counting coins at a laundromat? Checking couch cushions for quarters?" The ballroom howled. A woman near the dance floor laughed until tears tracked down her cheeks. Two men in the corner raised their glasses toward Brad like he'd scored a winning point. Even the bartender smirked. Nah, but seriously, Wes. Can I call you Wes? I genuinely want to thank you. Brad raised his champagne. Every single time my wife looks at you, she loves me a little more. You're like a walking, breathing reminder of what not to settle for. So honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for being you. Tiffany kissed his cheek. My hero. The crowd clinked glasses. Someone started a slow clap that built into full applause. A few guests rose from their chairs. Not for Wesley, for Brad. For the performance, for the spectacle of a man being torn apart in public while standing perfectly still. Wesley sat through every second of it. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, didn't pull out his phone and show them the Bloomberg article, the Forbes cover, the TechCrunch interview where he'd been called the most quietly powerful figure in American fintech. He didn't mention the Series D, didn't bring up the $840 million, didn't tell them the Honda Accord was a choice, not a circumstance, that the plain shirt was a preference, not a limitation, that the man they were laughing at could have bought this country club, fired every single person in it, and still had enough left to do it twice. He just sat there, water glass half empty, hands folded, eyes steady. And when Brad finally lowered the mic, when Tiffany turned away to accept kisses from her bridesmaids, when the laughter thinned and the string quartet resumed its careful melody, Wesley spoke. Not loud, not angry, just clear enough to carry. I wish you both every happiness. I mean that. Tiffany froze for half a second, then recovered, tossed her hair. See? Boring. No fire, no fight, no ambition. Just nothing. That's what I left. She walked away. Brad followed. The guests returned to their champagne and their whispered verdicts about the man at the back table who didn't belong. And Wesley sat alone, surrounded by 300 people who believed, with absolute certainty, that they knew exactly who he was. Not one of them did. Not yet. The reception moved into its second hour, the way a bonfire builds, slowly at first, then all at once. The champagne kept flowing. The music shifted from string quartet to a DJ spinning crowd pleasers. The dance floor filled. And the jokes about Wesley didn't stop. They evolved. What started as Tiffany's targeted performance had become the evening's unofficial entertainment. The man at the back table, the broke ex, the punchline who hadn't left yet. A groomsman, thick neck, red face, 3 glasses deep, wandered over to Wesley's table, pulled out a chair without asking and sat down across from him. Hey man, Brad's buddy, quick question. He leaned forward, elbows on the tablecloth. Is it true about the hot dogs? The gas station thing? Wesley looked at him. It's true. The groomsman slapped the table and howled. That's insane, bro. A gas station date. He pulled out his phone. Say that again. I'm recording this for the group chat. Wesley didn't repeat it, just turned his glass slowly on the tablecloth. The groomsman recorded anyway. A 5-second clip of Wesley's profile, captioned with 3 laughing emojis and the words, "The broke ex is real." It hit the group chat within seconds, then Instagram stories, then a few public posts. The hashtag started small, #BrokeX@the-wedding. 2 women from Tiffany's sorority approached next. One of them sat on the edge of Wesley's table, right on the tablecloth, and crossed her legs like she was posing for a photo. So you're the famous Wesley. She looked at her friend. He's kind of cute in a sad way, right? Like a rescue dog. Her friend snorted. Girl, don't insult rescue dogs. At least they get adopted. They both laughed. Hard. One of them snapped a selfie with Wesley in the background, unaware and unmoving, and posted it with the caption, "The ex is giving nothing. Literally nothing. Hashtag wedding content." Wesley said nothing. He picked up his water glass, took a sip, set it back down. Back at the head table, Brad was having the best night of his life. He'd never been this funny, never had a room this responsive. Every time the energy dipped, all he had to do was glance in Wesley's direction and deliver another line. "Hey, Wes, you want some cake? Oh, wait, you probably need the coupon first." Laughter. "Someone get this man a doggy bag. He's probably never seen this much food in one place." More laughter. Tiffany leaned into the mic. "Be nice, babe. He once told me he'd take me to Paris. I think he meant the Paris buffet at the strip mall." The room erupted. Brad kissed her forehead. "God, I love you." Brad was drunk now. Not stumbling drunk, performing drunk. The kind where the filter dissolves and what's underneath comes out grinning. He grabbed the mic during the cake cutting and pointed it at Wesley from across the room. "You know what the best part is? He's still here, still sitting there. Bro, you got no money, no woman, no suit, and you're still here? What are you waiting for? A tip?" The ballroom shook. That one crossed a line and everyone felt it, but no one stopped laughing. The DJ lowered the music. The catering staff paused. The whole room was locked in now. Wesley set down his water, looked at Brad across 60 feet of crystal and white linen, and smiled. Not a sarcastic smile, not a wounded one, a real one. Small, quiet, the kind that belongs to someone who knows something no one else in the room does. Tiffany saw it. It unsettled her in a way she couldn't name. She'd known Wesley for 2 years. She'd seen him disappointed, tired, distant, but never this. This wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't surrender. It was something else entirely. She shook it off, grabbed Brad, kissed him hard. The crowd cheered, but the smile stayed with her, like a splinter she couldn't reach. Meanwhile, the evening's real turning point had already walked through the door. Gerald Shaw arrived at 9:40, late, as usual, tall, silver-haired, early 60s, with the posture of a man who'd spent 40 years walking into rooms where his opinion rearranged outcomes. He ran Whitmore and Associates, one of the largest private equity firms on the East Coast. He was also Brad's father's college roommate, which was the only reason he was at this wedding at all. Gerald didn't care about weddings. He cared about deals. And lately, the only deal he cared about was getting a face-to-face with the founder of Pinnacle Capital. He'd sent 3 formal meeting requests through his acquisitions team over the past 6 months. All 3 had been politely declined. Wesley Montgomery's calendar was locked. His gatekeepers were immovable. Gerald had even flown to a San Francisco fintech conference, hoping to catch him on a panel. Montgomery had canceled at the last minute. The man was brilliant, but invisible. The kind of founder who let the numbers speak and kept his face out of the press, unless Forbes or Bloomberg forced it out of him. Gerald accepted a glass of sparkling water and scanned the room out of habit. Suits, gowns, the usual. Then his eyes landed on a man sitting alone at a table near the back. Plain white shirt, no tie, hands folded, water glass half empty. Gerald's chest tightened. He knew that face. He'd studied it on a screen for months, in investor decks, in earnings call thumbnails, in a Bloomberg profile he'd read 4 times. The face belonged to the one person in American fintech who'd turned down Gerald Shaw 3 times in a row. Wesley Montgomery was sitting at the back table of his godson's wedding, being laughed at by 300 people who didn't know the difference between broke and quiet. Gerald set his glass down on the nearest surface. His hand trembled, not from nerves, but from the sheer, staggering absurdity of what he was seeing. The most valuable person in this building, possibly the most valuable person he'd been in a room with all year, was being treated like a party trick. He'd heard the laughter when he walked in. He caught the tail end of Brad's crack about the tip. He'd seen the phones, the grins, the casual, coordinated cruelty of 300 people who had no idea what they were looking at. Gerald stood still for a full minute, watching, processing. His jaw tightened with every second. Then he moved. He crossed the ballroom with the kind of stride that makes people step aside without being asked. Past the dance floor. Past the bridesmaids taking selfies. Past the bar. Straight to Brad. He caught Brad mid-laugh, grabbed his arm, not gently. Brad turned. "Uncle Gerald, you made it! You missed my speech. It was—" "Bradley." Gerald's voice was low, controlled, the kind of quiet that makes loud people go still. "The man at the back table, the one you've been mocking all night." Brad grinned. "Oh, Wes? That's Tiffany's broke ex. Hilarious, right? Guy's got literally nothing." Gerald's grip tightened. "Do you know who he is?" Brad laughed. "Yeah, some finance guy. Works at a bank or something. Why?" Gerald leaned in, close enough that Brad could smell the peppermint on his breath, close enough that no one else could hear. "Google his name. Right now." Brad blinked. "What?" "Wesley Montgomery. Google it. Now. And do it quietly." Something in Gerald's voice killed the grin. Not the words, the weight behind them. The way his hand hadn't released Brad's arm. The way a man who'd managed a $20 billion portfolio for 3 decades looked like he'd just witnessed a catastrophe. Brad pulled out his phone, thumbed to the search bar, typed with one hand, champagne still in the other. WESLEYMONTGOMERY. He hit search. The results loaded in less than a second, and everything, the champagne, the laughter, the cufflinks, the DJ, the cake, the country club, the 300 guests, the bride, the vows, the entire performance of this entire night stopped making sense. The first result was Forbes. Wesley Montgomery, the quiet architect behind Pinnacle Capital's $840 million valuation. Brad stared at the screen, the champagne glass in his other hand tilted slightly. A thin stream of golden liquid ran down his knuckles and dripped onto the marble floor. He didn't notice. He scrolled. Bloomberg. How one founder redefined algorithmic lending and why Wall Street can't stop watching. TechCrunch. Pinnacle Capital closes Series D at $840 million, led by Montgomery's vision for decentralized risk modeling. Wall Street Journal. The most quietly powerful man in American fintech doesn't want your attention. He already has your money. Forbes, 30 under 40. A photo of Wesley in a plain gray t-shirt, arms crossed, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in equations. The same whiteboard, the same garage, the same man. Brad's thumb stopped moving. His mouth was open, but nothing was coming out. The phone screen reflected off his eyes, tiny white text scrolling across his pupils like a stock ticker delivering the worst news of his life. Gerald stood beside him, arms folded, face unreadable. "I've been trying to get a meeting with that man for 6 months," Gerald said quietly. 6 months, Bradley. My team sent 3 formal requests. All declined. I flew to San Francisco to catch him at a conference. He didn't show. And you, Gerald paused, exhaled through his nose. You just spent your entire wedding calling him broke. Brad looked up from the phone. His face had changed. The confidence, the swaggering, performing, champagne-fueled confidence that had carried him all night was gone, replaced by something he'd never worn before in his life. Genuine, bone-deep fear. That's not... Brad's voice cracked. He said he worked in finance. He does work in finance. Gerald's tone was flat. He runs it. Brad turned and looked across the ballroom. Wesley was still sitting at the back table. Same position, same glass of water, same folded hands. He hadn't moved, hadn't checked his phone, hadn't looked in Brad's direction even once. He was just sitting there. The same way he'd been sitting there all night. The same way he'd sat through every joke, every insult, every coin thrown at his feet, every camera pointed at his face. And now, Brad understood the smile. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't patience. It was the quiet, unshakable certainty of a man who knew, who had always known, that the room would catch up eventually. Brad's hands were shaking. He looked at Gerald. Does Tiffany know? I doubt it. Jesus Christ. Brad ran his hand through his hair. His fingers left damp streaks on his forehead. Jesus Christ. The news didn't stay with Brad for long. It couldn't. Not in a room built on gossip. Gerald mentioned it to his wife. A quiet word behind a champagne flute. His wife's eyes went wide. She turned to the woman beside her, a real estate attorney named Patricia something, and whispered. Patricia grabbed her husband's arm. Her husband pulled out his phone. Within 2 minutes, the domino effect had started. Table by table, phone by phone, the truth rippled outward from the head table like a shockwave. You could track its path by watching the faces. First, confusion, then disbelief. Then the slow, sickening recognition of what they'd been part of. A woman who'd laughed at the coupon story now sat frozen with her hand over her mouth. The groomsman who'd recorded Wesley for the group chat was frantically trying to delete the video. The sorority girl who'd called him a rescue dog set her phone face down on the table and didn't pick it up again. The laughter had stopped. Not all at once, not like someone hit a switch, but in waves, table by table, conversation by conversation, until the ballroom that had roared with 300 voices 10 minutes ago held a silence so thick you could hear ice melting in abandoned glasses. The DJ kept playing. He hadn't gotten the memo. A pop song bounced off the chandeliers and fell on a room full of people who couldn't look at each other. Tiffany noticed the shift before she understood it. The energy in the room had changed, like a weather front moving through. People were looking at their phones instead of the dance floor. Small clusters formed and dissolved. Someone at table 9 was crying. She grabbed a bridesmaid's arm. What's happening? What is everyone looking at? The bridesmaid didn't answer. She just turned her phone screen toward Tiffany. Forbes, Bloomberg, the photo, the valuation, $840 million. Tiffany's knees didn't buckle. Her face didn't crumble. It was worse than that. What happened was slower, more complete, like watching a building lose its foundation one floor at a time. Her eyes moved from the phone screen to the back of the room, to the table near the exit, to the man in the plain white shirt who was still, after everything, sitting there with his hands folded and his water glass half empty. The man she'd called garbage. The man she'd left because he sat in a garage with a laptop. The man whose coupon she'd turned into a punchline for 300 strangers. That man was worth $840 million. And he'd come to her wedding in a Honda Accord. Brad reached Wesley's table first. The swagger was gone, replaced by the stiff, mechanical gait of a man whose legs were moving faster than his brain could process. He still had the champagne glass in his hand. He didn't know why. Wesley. His voice came out too high. He cleared his throat. Hey, listen, I just want to say... Say what? Wesley's voice was calm. The same calm it had been all night, but something new sat underneath it. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. The kind that comes from watching someone finally arrive at a place you've been standing for hours. Brad swallowed. We were just having fun. Wedding humor. Nobody meant any of... You told 300 people I belonged on my knees. The words landed like a slap. Brad flinched. Actually flinched. You said I was a walking reminder of what not to settle for. Wesley's eyes didn't waver. Which part was the joke, Brad? Brad set the champagne down. His hand shook so badly the stem clinked against the tablecloth holder. I was drinking. I got carried away. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. You're sorry because you're scared, not because you're wrong. Brad had nothing. 6 feet tall, gold cufflinks, designer suit, the groom at his own wedding, and he had absolutely nothing to say to the man he'd spent 4 hours destroying. Tiffany appeared behind him, mascara already smudging. Not from tears, not yet. From the frantic way she'd been pressing her palms against her face since the bridesmaid showed her the screen. Wesley. Her voice was smaller now, like someone had turned the volume all the way down. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Would it have mattered? Her lips parted. No sound came out, because they both knew the answer. If she'd known, she wouldn't have been kinder. She would have been strategic. She would have kept him, not out of love, but access, proximity to the number on that screen. And standing here now, in her white gown, with her new husband trembling beside her, she couldn't even pretend otherwise. The silence between the three of them was the loudest thing in the room. Wesley pushed back his chair, stood slowly, buttoned the top button of his plain white shirt. The room went still. 300 people watching one man rise from a back table. No one whispered, no one recorded. Every phone was down for the first time all night. Gerald Shaw stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. He extended his hand, not casually, but formally, the way you greet someone you've spent half a year trying to reach. Mr. Montgomery, Gerald Shaw, Whitmore and Associates. I've been trying to get a meeting with you for quite some time. Wesley shook his hand, firm, brief. I know who you are, Mr. Shaw. Your team has been persistent. Would you be open to a conversation? At your convenience, of course. Wesley nodded once. Have your office call mine on Monday. Gerald exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for 6 months. The rest of the room watched in silence. The groomsman who'd recorded Wesley for the group chat stood near the bar with his phone in his pocket and his eyes on the floor. The sorority girl who'd called him a rescue dog had her arms crossed tight against her chest, staring at nothing. The woman who'd pulled her clutch closer when Wesley walked past now couldn't bring herself to look up from her plate. A few guests stepped forward, the bold ones, the networking ones, with business cards between their fingers and rehearsed smiles already forming. Mouths full of words that hadn't been available to them an hour ago. Wesley didn't stop, didn't collect their cards, didn't acknowledge a single one of them. He paused at the ballroom door, turned halfway, found Brad and Tiffany near the head table, bride and groom side by side, looking smaller than they had all night. Enjoy your evening. The same words he'd offered hours ago. But they landed differently now. Heavier. Slower. Final. He walked through the marble entrance hall, past the valet who still hadn't learned his name, into his Honda Accord. The engine turned over. The headlights swept across the row of German luxury cars parked in their perfect rows, and Wesley Montgomery drove away from the most expensive night of someone else's life without saying another word. The first video hit TikTok before Wesley's Honda Accord reached the highway. It was the groomsman's clip. The 5-second recording captioned, "The broke ex is real," with 3 laughing emojis. He'd tried to delete it. Too late. Someone in the group chat had already screen recorded it and reposted it to their own page with the comment, "Y'all are not gonna believe how this ends." Within an hour, it had 12,000 views. By midnight, someone had stitched it together with 2 other clips, Tiffany's microphone speech and Brad's toast about the tip, and uploaded a compilation titled, "Bride Invites Her Ex to Wedding," just to humiliate him. Wait for the twist. That video crossed 200,000 views before sunrise. By Monday morning, it was everywhere. Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, news aggregators, morning radio shows. Every platform had its own version, each a little louder, a little angrier than the last. Comment sections filled with a fury that was specific and personal. The kind of rage that comes from people who've been in that room before, who've been the person at the back table, who've sat through laughter that was aimed like a weapon and couldn't do anything but breathe through it. Hashtag Justice for Wesley started trending at 11 a.m. on Monday. By Tuesday, it was the #1 hashtag on Twitter in the United States. By Wednesday, it had jumped to Instagram and TikTok, with reaction videos, duets, and commentary from creators with millions of followers. The internet did what the internet does. It dug. Brad Whitfield, age 32, Regional Operations Manager at Hargrove & Tate, a mid-tier commercial real estate firm in Charlotte. Salary, $140,000 a year. Comfortable, but not wealthy. The BMW in the country club parking lot? Leased. The honeymoon in the Maldives? Financed through a travel credit line. The gold cufflinks? A wedding gift from his father-in-law. The country club? Booked on a payment plan. Every layer peeled back revealed the same thing. Brad Whitfield was exactly what he'd accused Wesley of being. A man performing wealth he didn't have. Playing rich in front of a room full of people doing the same thing. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. It became the story's second engine. Reddit threads dissected his LinkedIn. Twitter users pulled his Zillow history. Someone found a car lease dispute through a public court filing. A college classmate posted a thread claiming Brad had once borrowed money for rent and never paid it back. Brad's employer got tagged in every other post. At Hargrove Tate, do you condone this behavior? Is this who represents your company? The firm's PR team issued a boilerplate statement on Wednesday. We are aware of the situation and are conducting an internal review. By Thursday, Brad was placed on administrative leave. By the following Monday, he was terminated. The official reason? Conduct unbecoming of a company representative at a public event. The real reason was simpler. He'd become a liability no press release could contain. Tiffany's unraveling was slower, but just as thorough. Her social media history became public entertainment. Screenshots surfaced of Instagram posts from the past 3 years. Captions about knowing your worth, leveling up, and never settling for less. One post from 18 months ago showed her posing in front of a leased Mercedes with the caption, "When God removes the wrong people from your life, He replaces them with everything you deserve." The wrong people. Wesley. The comments piled on like an avalanche. Tens of thousands. People she'd never met dissecting every post, every photo, every word she'd ever published. Her follower count plummeted as people unfollowed in waves. A small skincare brand that had sponsored 2 of her posts quietly pulled the partnership. Her account went private on Wednesday. By Friday, it was gone. Friends vanished. The bridesmaids who'd posed in matching dresses stopped returning calls. The sorority sisters who'd mocked Wesley at the table scrubbed their own pages and went dark. Nobody wanted to be the next screenshot. Nobody wanted their name attached to the hashtag. Tiffany's mother called twice a day, not to comfort, to ask when it would stop. People at my church are talking about this. My coworker sent me the video. How could you do this, Tiffany? There was no answer. There had never been one. Meanwhile, Wesley Montgomery said nothing. No statement, no interview, no social media post, no press release from Pinnacle Capital. His communications team fielded over 200 media requests in the first week. Every single one declined. The line was always the same. Mr. Montgomery has no comments on personal matters. His silence became the loudest part of the story. In a world where everyone responded, reacted, clapped back, and posted their side, Wesley's refusal to engage made him untouchable. You can't argue with a man who won't speak. You can't spin a narrative against someone who refuses to participate in one. Gerald Shaw's meeting happened the following Thursday. Pinnacle Capital's headquarters, a glass-walled office on the 31st floor of a building Wesley's company owned outright. Gerald arrived 15 minutes early with his full acquisitions team. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When it was over, Gerald shook Wesley's hand and said 4 words to his team in the elevator. Whatever he wants. Done. The deal closed 3 weeks later. Whitmore & Associates invested $92 million into Pinnacle Capital's expansion fund, the largest single investment Gerald had personally championed in over a decade. In a Bloomberg interview, Gerald kept it brief. I met Wesley Montgomery at a wedding where he was being humiliated, publicly, viciously, for hours, by the bride and the groom, in front of 300 people. He paused, adjusted his glasses. He didn't raise his voice, didn't defend himself, didn't wave a Forbes article in anyone's face. He just sat there, quietly, with his hands folded. Another pause. That told me more about his character than any pitch deck ever could. That's the kind of person I want managing my money. The quote went viral. It became the story's final image, not the insults, not the hashtag, not the firing. Gerald Shaw, silver-haired and measured, telling the world that the quietest man in the room turned out to be the most powerful one in the building. Wesley never responded to that quote either. He didn't need to. 6 months later, Wesley Montgomery still woke up at 5:15. Same apartment, same coffee mug, same 4-mile loop through the same quiet streets. The Honda Accord still sat in the same parking spot, still ticked the same way when the engine cooled. Nothing about his morning had changed. Nothing about the way he moved through the world had shifted by a single degree. But the world had shifted around him. Pinnacle Capital crossed the $1 billion valuation mark on a Tuesday afternoon in October. A junior analyst saw it on Bloomberg first and let out a sound that was half gasp, half laugh. The room erupted. Wesley looked up from his laptop, nodded once, and said, "Good. What's next on the agenda?" No champagne toast, no company-wide email, just a nod and a pivot. The same way he'd handled everything else. The Forbes cover, the Series D, the Gerald Shaw deal, the 300 people who'd laughed at him in a ballroom and spent the next 6 months pretending they'd never been there. The Shaw partnership had exceeded every projection. The $92 million investment generated returns that made Whitmore & Associates board send Gerald a personal note of congratulations, something they'd done exactly twice in the firm's 40-year history. Gerald told a colleague over lunch, "Best handshake I ever made, and I almost didn't go to that wedding." Brad Whitfield moved to a smaller city 2 states away. The termination from Hargrove and Tate followed him, not officially, but in the way these things always do. Hiring managers Googled. HR departments checked social media. The video was still circulating, still attached to his name, like a scar no resume could cover. He found work eventually, a mid-level role at a property management firm that didn't screen for viral infamy. The salary was less than half of what he'd made before. The BMW went back to the dealer when the lease payments became unsustainable. He drove a used Nissan now. The irony was lost on no one. The marriage lasted 4 months. Tiffany filed first. The public fallout had cracked something between them that couldn't be repaired. Not the embarrassment itself, but what it exposed. Brad wasn't who he'd pretended to be. The wealth was a costume. The confidence was performance. Once the audience left, there was nothing underneath. Tiffany tried to reach Wesley 3 times after the divorce. A text, an email, a handwritten letter sent to Pinnacle Capital's corporate address. 2 pages about regret, timing, and how she'd always known he was special, but couldn't see it clearly enough. Wesley read the letter, all of it, folded it neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and set it in his desk drawer. He didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge. He simply had nothing left to say to someone who'd only ever seen him through the lens of what he could provide. On a quiet evening in late November, Wesley sat in his office on the 31st floor. The city stretched out below, a grid of lights and movement and ambition. On his desk, next to quarterly reports and a cold cup of coffee, sat a cream-colored envelope, thick stock, gold lettering, the wedding invitation he'd never thrown away. He picked it up, turned it over, ran his thumb across the embossed letters of Tiffany's name, held it for a long moment, not with anger, not with sadness, but with the quiet, settled finality of a man closing a chapter he'd finished reading a long time ago. He dropped it in the trash, took a sip of coffee, turned back to his screen, and kept working. I think about this story a lot, not because of the money, not because of the twist, because of the silence. Wesley sat in a room where 300 people told him he was nothing, and he didn't say a word. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't need to. That's what stays with me. The people who truly know their worth don't waste a single breath proving it to those who've already decided they're worthless. What would you have done if you were Wesley that night? Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have shown them who you were right there on the spot? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit you the way it hit me, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one everybody should have been listening to. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Stories like this don't come around often, and the next one might be even crazier. Wild. People who know their worth don't waste time proving it to those who've already made up their minds. Real power stays quiet. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. The truth always catches up. Always.